All right, tonight we are going to be doing our third series of getting us prepared for the high holidays. 2 weeks ago, we spoke about the dilemma of why we are going to blow the shofar on Saturday because we don't have second day Yontiv yet. I didn't say we're kosher in the kitchen yet. Okay. Last week, we talked about why we do 3 times repetition of Kol Dre, entering God's throne and God seeing us as a sovereign for that third and final time. So tonight we're going to talk about something a little bit difficult. And every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, my mom always asks, do we have to do that prayer? And the prayer that she's speaking about is Unatana Tokef. The prayer that will say, let us proclaim the sacred power of this day. For your dominion is exalted, you are judge and arbiter, counsel and truth. You guys know the rest. It happens after the Gevurot, so we do the first 2 parts of Tefillah. Technically, we should be standing at Rosh Hashanah, that's what Ralph said, but we sit down. We go through this deep liturgy. It is terrifying, and we're supposed to tremble. We think about judgments. We think about all those who will do well and all those who won't do well, those who will die by famine, those who will be tranquil. So it's a very difficult prayer for us to process. And the great question is, even in the Reformed tradition, we still decided to include it. And the other question is, why do we do it right before the Kedusha? In this congregation, that's when we do the Holy, Holy, Holy. That is the Edward Stark composer in the early 20th century who wrote this bombastic piece with full organ and full choir, and then Cantor Whitner goes right into it. So I just want to talk about as to why we have this prayer in our Machzor, in our prayer book. If you look at the footnote or the Old Gates of Prayer, it's going to tell you that it was written by Rabbi Amnon of Mainz around the 11th and 12th century in the medieval German-speaking lands. For those who are Ashkenazic Jews, Jews from Central Europe, a lot of us can trace our ancestors to Speyer, Worms, and Mainz, so this area in the center west of Germany. It was a bad time for Jews. We had the Crusades, we had pogroms, and Rabbi Mainz refused to become a Christian. And according to the legend that was written a couple centuries later in Or Zal Ruach, which is a prayer book, he said these words as he was getting, there's kids in this room, severely punished for not converting to Christianity. But again, that is a legend. We think we have similar language from the 8th century of rabbis talking about this day of judgment. For the most part, maybe they're picking up something from Midrashim, analytical stories about the Torah, that talk about a day in which we're supposed to tremble and fear. For those who took my Introduction to Judaism class, I said that Judaism has a passion of really using other people's cultures and influences to make it their own. And for example, if you ever see ultra-Orthodox wearing the high white socks, they're modeling the Polish aristocracy around the 17th century. But the idea of judgment in the book of life, they picked up this when they were in exile in Babylonia. They liked these themes of day of judgment, who will be inscribed. So for the most part, the origins of this liturgy was influenced by the Babylonians, and the rabbis liked this. But the question remains as to why we would say this piyut, this liturgical poem, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Again, we go through the responsive reading by earthquake, by famine, by fire. It's difficult for us, for some of us, to process the liturgy of this prayer. So the first explanation as to why we recite this on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, is because according to the tradition by the 11th century, by Or Zal Ruach, that Rabbi Amnon said these words right around Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, it made sense to put this prayer during the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur service. But the next question is, where are we going to put it? When I talked about the Kedusha, we are sanctifying God's name. But before that, we are asking God to judge us fairly. So at the end of the prayer, we kind of pause, and I say, but repentance, prayer, and charity temper judgment's severe decree. And then the choir does that big note, Utashuva. The prayer itself is not really about God judging us harshly, and this is very important. The prayer itself is to remind us that even with all the complexities of life that we experience, we're supposed to envision that God is kind of processing our day every day. Not the word judgment, but God looks through our lives each day and sees how we are doing. But even in our darkest hour, even if we weren't ourselves during the day, we always can get back on the path through teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, but through repentance, prayer, and charity. So it's really not so much about famine and earthquake and fire, but it's really about how God is able to empathize with us if we are able to remember our humanities and our limitations, because even when we're not our best selves, it's through teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah that we are able to get back on the right path. So even when we go through this reading, and it's highly cued during the high holidays, in a way, it is a prayer for hope for us to change. Now, I'm saying this in front of Kenner Whitner and Lester. The version we do at OJEF is Lewandowski's, correct? The arrangement, for the most part. But other than that, it's from Sinai. We really don't know who actually composed the Unatana Tokef. It's a mystery. It makes things kind of exciting, but there's a reason why when we get to Rosh Chodesh Elul, and here we are in Elul, and before the high holidays, that I want to give Kenner Whitner a break. Because he does Amidah, he does Gevurot, and he does the Unatana Tokef with significant solo parts, and then he does the stark Kedusha. Very few cannors can do what Kenner Whitner can do. So for me, as his colleague, his friend, I'm in a state of awe as our cannors lead us in such prayer and skill set. And he does it with a smile on his face, and he's happy to do it. But for me, it's a proud moment, not only with liturgy, but to see such skill set. So that is the Unatana Tokef. So as much as it is scary when we read it and intimidating, at the end, it's about our willingness to pivot and make a change. Shabbat Shalom. We rise together. Aleinu 586.